Hello everyone, Ravi Tej on the side. Welcome to the Third Man Cricket Podcast. It's been quite long that we all probably met, and to be honest, we were just talking about how it's been long overdue a single episode, and there is a lot of cricketing action that necessarily took place in the last 2 months, be it the World T20, the subsequent tour of New Zealand to India, wherein we played T20s and uh, tests, and New Zealand pretty much returned uh, winless, and of course that marked the arrival of the great Rahul Dravid as a coach. And subsequently, we also saw a lot of soap opera happening off the ground, which is about uh, the captaincy debate, if not the debate, the conclusion perhaps of how Kohli was stripped off the ODI captaincy and how Rohit Sharma has been promoted further, and there's a lot more contradictory viewpoints from the test captain and the current BCCI president. Uh, of course, this is an evolving story, and as we discussed, right, probably as the days pass, we're gonna get some more, for the lack of words, I can say masala that we can be fed on, and we can discuss further. But for today, I think the primary focus that me and Pawan Bhai wanted to talk was about the much awaited India tour of South Africa, wherein we're going to play three tests and then subsequently the ODIs as well. The T20s, I believe, would be played at a later point in time. But the much needed action at South Africa is well in place, to well in schedule as well to happen. There were initial Omicron related threats that the cricketing world actually saw, but thankfully, none of the series, or at least the much awaited series of India tour of South Africa, or even the Ashes, are pretty much on track. So today we're going to discuss India tour of South Africa and how we've never won a Test series there. We did get quite close the last time around, I'll say, but not as close as the series uh, tally or the numbers suggest, but we were indeed quite close. And I think the men in blue with under Kohli have their best chance, considering how South Africa and their squad is kind of placed now. So we'll dive deep more, and then of course take inputs of Pawan Bhai as well. Hey Pawan Bhai, how are you doing? Quick thoughts on your not playing 11, but the squads to start with, because the South African squad needs to be talked about much. And then, of course, the playing 11 for the first test, at least to start with on the Boxing Day.
Thank you very much, Ravi, for that introduction. Yes, we are back after a long hiatus, and I would like to welcome our viewers as well. Yes, we're looking forward to an engrossing tour of South Africa by the Indian team. And if we dive directly into the squads, and if we start off on the Indian Test squad, not many surprises were there. And if you ask me about, the playing 11 that India are likely to play in that first Boxing Day Test match at Centurion, when the original squad was selected, there were question marks as to who would open with Rohit Sharma. Would it be KL or Mayank? Considering Mayank's recent exploits in the home series against New Zealand, it would be difficult to ignore him. But I guess the injury to Rohit Sharma must have set aside those questions, and I see Mayank and Rahul, the two childhood buddies from Karnataka, opening the batting for India. And you'll have the usual suspects in the middle order, Pujara at three, followed by Kohli at four. The interesting point for me in the playing 11 would be to see what kind of approach the captain Virat Kohli takes over here, because historically he's been um, very insistent on playing five bowling options when India play overseas. So if he decides to do that, he does not have a certain Ravindra Jadeja to balance up things in this kind of a situation. So at number five, I think it will be a battle between Ajinkya Rahane and Hanuma Vihari and Shreyas Iyer, with Shreyas Iyer coming from that series against New Zealand with those kind of performances. It will be very difficult to ignore him. Ajinkya Rahane has been short of runs over a considerable amount of time. I think it's going to be an exactly a year since he made a meaningful contribution by scoring a century in that last year's Boxing Day Test match at Melbourne, which resulted in India winning and coming back and leveling the series and then going on to win it. The pressure is definitely on him. But I think if they have taken a senior player like him on tour, they might find it difficult to make him sit outside the playing 11. Although cannot ignore the fact what Kohli did in that series in South Africa in 2017 and 18, where Rahane, being the vice captain, was ignored for the first two test matches. Um, and so I see that at least for the first test match, they will go ahead with Ajinkya Rahane, which opens up the question for number six slot. If they want to go in with um, Ashwin and Shardul both, then I think Rishabh Pant plays at six, and then Ashwin, being the lone spinner, plays at number seven, followed by Shardul Thakur at eight. The two sort of bowling all rounders in the team, followed by the three frontline seamers, uh, Bumrah and Shami being the first two picks. And I think the third seamer has to be Mohammad Siraj. Um, and I would play him ahead of Ishan Sharma, considering Siraj's exploits in different conditions in Australia, in England, and in the home test against New Zealand at Mumbai as well. I don't think you can look beyond him as far as the seam attack is concerned. So if they decide to play five bowling options, which I personally think they don't need to, I think batting has been our Achilles heel in overseas conditions where we have consistently failed to put up 300 plus scores in the first innings. I would opt for that extra insurance in the batting, at least for the first test match, considering the potent seam attack that South Africa has. And I would play six frontline batsmen plus Pant, and then the four regular bowlers, which means Ashwin plays along with three frontline seamers, Bumrah, Shami, and Siraj. And at number six, I would play Shreyas Iyer. I know it will be very hard on Hanuma Vihari. He has not got a chance to represent the country after his heroics in Sydney earlier this year. But considering just on form, uh, I would think that Shreyas would best fit him, and that would be the playing 11 in my view for India. And moving on to South Africa, to be honest, they've got a mix of youth and experience, but some of their youngsters are an unknown quantity to me as well. I see Dean Elgar, the captain, being their frontline opening batsman, and the onus will be on the likes of Temba Bavuma, Aiden Markram, and Rassie van der Dusen, along with the seasoned veteran in the domestic circuit of South African cricket, Cregan Peterson, to hold the fort for them as far as their batting is concerned. They like to play the all-rounder Vian Mulder in there, so I think he is pretty much going to be in the playing 11, and you'll have Quinton de Kock as well, who I think is available only for the first test match. Uh, and this morning they suffered a blow when one of their mainstays in the pace bowling artillery, Andre Nokia, was ruled out of the squad or out of the series, unfortunately. So that might force them to just tweak their plans as far as the seam attack is concerned. They would still be potent. You obviously have the usual suspects, Kagiso Rabada and Lungi Ngiri, and Keshav Maharaj, the lone spinner, who has done very well for them across conditions. I think the third seamer is going to be Duan Olivier, who has a fantastic record till date in Test cricket. I think he's played 9 to 10 Test matches and averages less than 22 with the ball. Most of those Test matches have come at home, and then he went away on that callback route. But he's been brought back into the South African scheme of things since then. I think the pace attack would still be very handful in those conditions. Um, Two potent seam attacks both the teams have. I think the team that bats well and puts up good consistent scores on the board in the first innings will have the upper hand in the series. But it'd be interesting to see how the series unfolds. The unfortunate thing, it's going to be held again behind closed doors with no crowds allowed due to the existence of the new variant Omicron in South Africa. But the tour has itself gone ahead in spite of such developments in South Africa. Is kudos to both the cricket boards, and I think India also sent a strong message to the rest of the countries that you have to honor the cricketing commitments in this day and time. So all in all, it promises to be an engrossing series, considering only once have India returned from South Africa undefeated, and that was when we drew the series in 2010-11 under MS Dhoni's captaincy. And I think Virat Kohli will look to become the first team to win like they did in Australia in 2018-19 and tick off all the boxes as far as achieving overseas Test series victories for India is concerned, and that will further cement his place as one of the greatest red ball captains the history of cricket has seen. So, hoping that uh, the bowlers and the batsmen come to the party and deliver the goods.
Certainly, yes. So, of course, New Zealand will be one other territory that has to be conquered probably after this, but let's not probably jump the gun. South Africa tour would be very exciting, and I think uh, after probably the England tour and after the World Cup debacle and a very, very dry, boring uh, New Zealand series. I think there's a lot that we can actually look forward. A quick thoughts on the playing 11, at least for on India's side, and I think I totally agree with you on the South African side. Despite Nokia not being available, right? I think South Africa still have a very potent pace attack, and it we still need to be batting very well. I think I personally feel that India still has a very good pace attack to probably manage the batsman. But despite not having Nokia, I think South Africa still kind of plays really well. Having said that, my thoughts on the playing 11 of India, I personally feel the debate is just between Anuma Vihari and Shardul Thakur. Uh, who would be that player? I personally don't want to see Ajinkya Rahane playing at least the first test. The debate should largely be about do we slot in Hanuma Vihari and strengthen our batting, or probably do we slot in someone like Shardul Thakur who's played an amazing innings at the Oval and has shown a lot of promise in terms of batting as well, be it at the Gaba exactly a year ago and also at the Oval. So my squad, Mayank, KL, Pujara, Virat, Iyer, and then either of Hanuma or Shardul will, if Hanuma is slotted, and some overs of off spin can we look get in from him is a question. And of course, the Rishabh Pant, and I think the four bowling options pretty much select themselves, and be it Ashwin, Shami, Bumrah, and Siraj. Last time around, Virat did a big mess up. I remember wherein he didn't pick Bhuvi, but instead slotted in Ishant. That move actually required a lot of guts to the say at the same time, but was a lot of was madness too, as in no one knew what was happening. uh, I think there's far more less confusion this time around, but despite this, if I see a Nishant playing over a Mohammad Siraj, right, I think I'd be personally very disappointed, irrespective of how what the result turns out to be. So that's pretty much my take on the playing 11. The next probably agenda point what I wanted to discuss is maybe we can briefly touch upon the whole captaincy or BCCI soap opera, and probably think about the red ball captaincy also, if it's in debate, or are his BCCI clear that okay, it's going to be Virat Kohli at least till this World Test Championship cycle ends? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, it's been a classic comedy of errors and a circus as far as the last couple of months is concerned with respect to the Indian captaincy. And historically, you see, no Indian captain has been powerful than the board, and whichever captain has decided to take on the might of the BCCI has had to do away with his job and even his place in the team. But I think in this whole fiasco, the lack of transparency from the BCCI is the main culprit as far as I'm concerned, um, because it has become a case of my word against yours when the president of the BCCI, Saurav Ganguly, comes and mentions X number of things to the press, and Virat Kohli counters that in his pre-departure press conference to South Africa. It opens up a can of worms, and it cannot be a situation where both of them are saying the truth. Only one of them will be saying out the truth, and the other would be saying otherwise. But as is the classic case, we, the fans, who are the majority stakeholders of the game, will never come to know what the actual truth is, and the BCCI will leave all of us in the lurch in their own classic way. But I think it also must have come as a um, sort of a reality check for Virat Kohli, considering that from the time he took over captaincy, uh, especially the white ball captaincy from the start of 2017, we had the committee of administrators at the helm of affairs in the BCCI, and who were pretty weak and uh, were not authoritative enough to maintain any sort of checks and balances, and that made sure that Virat Kohli became even more powerful. Mind you, the position of Indian captain has always been powerful, but it went up a notch and to a greater degree in Virat Kohli's tenure because of the lack of imposing figure in the BCCI. Um, and when that authority was challenged by the influx of Saurav Ganguly and Jay Shah in BCCI, who wanted to, wrest the power back in the domain of the BCCI, that might have ruffled the feathers of Virat Kohli. And it was a given that once he decided to give up the T20 captaincy, uh, he would also have to do away with the ODI captaincy, because it makes no sense to have different captains for the two white ball formats. The norm is to have one red ball captain and one white ball captain. It's just that the way it was communicated and handled in the media left a bad taste in everybody's mouth, and you obviously saw dirty linen being washed in public, as has been the case whenever um, captaincy has changed hands here in India. Very seldom we have seen a smooth transition from one captain to another. It went very awkwardly between Kapil Dev and Sunil Gavaskar all those years ago, then to Mohammad Azharuddin, and there was friction between Azharuddin and Tendulkar, and Dravid and Ganguly as well in the Greg Chappell era, followed by Kumble and Dhoni, then finally on to Virat Kohli. I mean, we are blessed to have, captaincy tenures as long they have lasted, and stability, not unlike our neighbors in Pakistan and Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, where captaincy is basically a game of musical chairs. But I think when it comes to transition points, it's very difficult to force the captain out of their, captaincy seat, as very seldom do players give captaincy up on their own. They have to be pushed and nudged to give up the captaincy, and so has been the case with Virat Kohli. I think when it comes to red ball cricket, he was untouchable until this point of time, considering his record and his performances as a white ball skipper. But the latest fiasco in the pre-departure press conference might have given him a very tight rope to walk on. And I can sense that if India don't win this upcoming Test series, and if he also does not have a good series with the bat, then BCCI will get that bargaining power to, relinquish him from the Test captaincy as well. But I think that is a long shot. Um, he must be persisted with, at least for this cycle of WTC, come what may. It's been 2 years since he has scored a century, but it's sad that in India we judge players' caliber or by the parameter of the number of hundreds they have scored. Every player has gone through their share of ups and downs. Tendulkar, Dravid, everybody has gone through. But I think for now, his red ball captaincy is safe. But more importantly for me, I would like to see Virat Kohli, the player, back in form and scoring runs for India. And I think once he starts scoring those runs, we will see him, in his previous avatar, as I must say, and which is only going to help Team India in the long run. So for now, I think the lines are very clear that he is taking charge of the red ball squad, and Rohit will make sure that he, along with the coaching staff, devises plans for the upcoming T20 World Cup and next year's One Day World Cup.
Oh yeah, so with the soap opera, right? As in, uh, what the entire country was probably in agreement was the fact that Virat Kohli's integrity cannot be questioned. Of course, there is arrogance, there is head weight, there is some amount of uh, some amount of, I'll say, probably something other than arrogance, which pretty much uh, um, makes it very troublesome and probably him very not accessible and whatnot. But having said that, he's been one player or individual who's been committed to BCCI cricket or Indian cricket, and his integrity cannot be questioned in terms of how the questions are answered and whatnot. So even during the India tour of Australia back in 2020, wherein subsequently after the IPL in Dubai, there were a lot of questions from that were raised on the unavailability of Rohit Sharma as a white ball opener, of course, but there was some amount of issues in terms of how Rohit's team have communicated to BCCI. Of course, it wasn't magnified as much as it should perhaps be, but Virat was still took a very strong stance and said, "Okay, we got the communication, but we didn't expect it to go this way." And he's made it clear and he's given the public the information probably they should be knowing. Um, so the question here also pretty much remains, as in we know of the BCCI president Saurav Ganguly and his some amount of controversies in the past, especially with with how the Great Chapel era was dealt, and of course we can take sides on who was right, who was wrong. Having said that, I personally felt there was a lot of a wave of sympathy that pretty much grew on Virat after this very fiasco. As you rightly said, very funny comedy of errors, as you said, but I think it was very poorly managed, and too many Twitter journalists had too much information, perhaps, to put it on, or probably were given too much importance. And it is what it is. Again, what again the judgment would pretty much be that the players should abide to what the BCCI General Secretary or the President would say. This is very different to the 2011 to 16 or maybe more, that era wherein N. Srinivasan and MS Dhoni worked in complete synergy, and we pretty much see a very different approach now. So it's, as I mentioned initially to start with, it's a very evolving situation, and as you rightly said, these factors are probably largely dependent on the on Virat's statistics as well, and of course the results that we're going to fetch. And World Test Championship, the way the schedule is currently, or the number of games that we're going to play, and it's still a big question if we will make to the finals. This series is very important. We were pretty much denied a victory at Kanpur with that whole last 45-minute drama. So that's going to be really pricey. It's going to be costly. Over it also has to be looked at this time around, considering not much of spin bowling and how the quota has to be bowled out. So there are a lot of factors in World Test Championship. The road to the final still looks a bit dicey. So that's my take on this. It would be really exciting to see Rahul Dravid, the coach, the first away tour under him, and if we conquer South Africa 2-0 or 2-1, I personally think it would be a 2-1 victory, wherein India would win the first two games and then lose the third. Uh, so what's your prediction for the tour? What do you think? So
I also pretty much think on similar lines that India look uh, in good shape to win the series. You see, South Africa has no option but to give good sporting green pitches in there, not like what they dished out in Joburg last time around. Even though India won that test match, it was a dog of a pitch to play test cricket on. That was just South Africa trying to avenge the kind of pitches they got in India in 2015, which were abysmal to say the least. Um, but I think India will need to be wary in the first two test matches in Centurion and Johannesburg because that is the high veld region, many meters above sea level. And Centurion is a ground where India traditionally struggled as far as test cricket is concerned. So I would give them the series 2-1. I would rate them as favorites at Joburg and Cape Town. The initial test match, our our problem has always been that first test match, and considering the pandemic that we are going through, there is lack of practice games as well. So it remains to be seen how we start the series. Hopefully, we start well. I'm pretty much sure that, like it happened in 2018, where most of the cricketing public were expecting India to win their first series in Australia. I think this time they're going to do it in South Africa and complete the circle.
Totally agreed. Any quick thoughts on the Ashes and how England are being hammered, and all of a sudden I see that uh, our two tours to Australia, and be it in 2018 under Virat or the 2020 tour under Jinx, have been hailed even more because in the second test at Adelaide wasn't necessarily an amazing Australian lineup. Of course, it is still good, quite nice, but uh, I mean, the bowling attack was not probably at its the best, at least on the paper, but still, we've seen how they ripped apart England. So, do you think any changes in the next three tests for England? And things look sorted for a final whitewash. What do you say?
It's been very disappointing to watch the series so far as a neutral cricketing fan. You want to expect a good battle between both the sides, but seldom has England stood up against Australia in Australia. Whereas Australia has always given England a tough fight in England in the Ashes series in the last so many years. But except for the 2010-11 series where England won 3-1 and were exceptional, they've always been abysmal down under, and they look pretty much set for another whitewash. I mean, this Australian team, the Australian teams of the past were much superior to the English teams, and you could, digest that scoreline as well. But this Australian team is not as good as the Englishmen are making them look. To be honest, they have, lots of chinks in their armor. They, of course, have a quality bowling attack uh, with them, but their batting, I think, can be put under pressure. Again, that improper selection from England, where they should have had a pace-heavy attack at the Gabba and played Jack Leach in Adelaide. Um they swapped those things and got their selections incorrect. I think they have to take the hard decision and make sure that they don't play both Stuart Broad and James Anderson in the same 11. I think that time is gone. You can play only either of them, and they've got to put uh, confidence into their young bowlers. I could not imagine them dropping Mark Wood for that second test match, and also Jack Leach, who has not been given any sort of confidence, to be honest. Joe Root bowled so many overs in the second test match, partly because of over rate issues. And you saw Nathan Lyon turning the ball square right from day two onwards. And their batting is in shambles. I cannot for the world of me think a team to be successful in Test cricket if they have Rory Burns and Hasib Hamid as their opening partners. You know, one of them has got to be very proactive and attacking. This is modern big Test cricket. You cannot have both the openers with you know uh, such loose techniques. I mean, Rory Burns, as it is another name in that long list of ugly-looking England opening batsmen. Um, and the tone was set right from the first part of the series when he got out to Mitchell Stark, which would usually be a freebie for a left-hander first up, and he made that ordinary delivery look into a good delivery by getting his feet into a tangle. And Joe Root has been very, very, average as a captain. For him to just come out and say the other day that the bowlers were putting wrong lengths in the first innings is just not acceptable. Then what are you doing as a captain on the field? Just like Ricky Ponting mentioned, if the bowlers are not bowling well, you go and speak and tell them that, hey, pitch the ball up. I mean, you play Mark Wood, Ollie Robinson, one of James Anderson or Stuart Broad, have Ben Stokes as the fourth seamer, and give enough confidence to Jack Leach as a spinner. You can, rile up and give good competition to the Aussies. Just think that they haven't had, much thoughts going into their team selection. Most of the power is vested with Chris Silverwood, who is the lone selector, along with Joe Root, who has a call in the playing 11. I think one bright spark has been David Milan. who has performed very well at number three. Um, and Oli Pope, for all his promise, has also been struggling. He always seems to be like a cat on a hot tin roof. It is in these circumstances that you expect senior players like Butler and Stokes to stand up and deliver. Butler did shed his natural game and played a couple of really good sessions on that last day, but it was very sad to see him get out the way that he did by hitting his wickets in the end. I do see, them going down if they are not able to turn up on the Boxing Day Test match. As a cricket fan, I would love them to win the Boxing Day Test match and put some life back into the series. I think Zach Crawley needs to be played at the top of the order. The game that he has and the kind of horizontal bat shots that he has is suitable to the Australian wickets. Um, and we've got to drop one of those openers in there and pretty much resettle their bowling lineup. Otherwise, if they lose the series pretty hands down, then I also sense danger to Joe Root's captaincy because he was the captain when they lost last time in Australia in 2017 for nothing. Then in the home Ashes, also Australia to the series and regain the Ashes. England was not able to win the Ashes held in 2019, and now if he loses the series again, I don't think an England captain might survive three losses in an Ashes series. Especially when captains in Australia and England are judged on an Ashes to Ashes basis. So you want to see more fight between these teams, and as a neutral cricket fan, that is what we expect. Hopefully, they turn up and get up from the right side of the bed come the Boxing Day and give us something nice to see.
Oh yes, more fight, not at all in sight. I think it's going to, uh, like you rightly pointed out, hopefully the MCT test would breathe some life into the series, but looks highly unlikely. So that's about it. I think for this, any final thoughts, Pawan?
That's it from my end, Ravi. I think we've had a good discussion on the agenda that we set out for, and I think let us reconvene at the end of the Boxing Day Test matches. So I think we'll have a good amount of cricket to discuss with respect to these two Boxing Day Test matches in South Africa and Australia.
Indeed. Happy listening, everyone. Thanks for your support. We'll be back soon. Take care, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you.